Okay, hey everyone, welcome to an episode of On the Wrist from Off the Cuff. Happy Seiko Saturday to everybody. Today we have a fun little Seiko comparison. We're going to be looking at two watches that kind of fall within that everyday watch space. And typically when you want something you can wear every day, you're going to want that versatile blend of both sporty and dressy attributes. Here we're going to have one that's going to be more sports leaning, one that's going to be more dress leaning. A little bit about the brand. Seiko was founded back in 1881. They are Japanese in origin, now factories throughout Asia. They cover all market segments from entry level to high end, and we'll be taking a look at the Seiko 5 Sports SNX series SRPL59, as well as the Seiko Presage SPB524. Now, of course, these do have international and JDM, or Japanese domestic market nomenclatures, which I'll list down in the description as well as in the title, so they're easier to find whether you're out in Japan or you're abroad internationally. But yeah, for all intents and purposes, these are the same watches regardless of the market. Now, the Seiko 5 Sports is a modern revival of their popular SNX series of smaller everyday watches, adding improved specs and build quality and three new, more classic colorways with gilt accents. These go for $415 MSRP, and I actually purchased this one from the Watch Connection shop out of Costa Mesa in Southern California. Big shout out to Noah from their team for getting me the best pricing available. I'll leave a link down in the description. And then when it comes to this Presage model, which is the JDM SARX132, it's actually part of the Presage Classic series that really reflects traditional sensibilities and sophisticated elegance, with ornate details like curved hands over a silk textured curved dial and a classic mid-sized case in a simple no-date format. These normally go for $1,000 MSRP, and I bought this one from overseas. I got it at Sakura Watches, and I got it for $612 right now if you go on there. But I do have a discount code for them, which I will leave down in the description, for 3% off of any Casio, Seiko, or Citizen watch. So with all that said, let's go ahead, zoom the camera out, get these pieces in hand, and take a closer look. Okay guys, now today's theme between these two is of course going to be the warm tone of gold, which has really made a comeback as of late. Also, the more sensible sizing. Here we have a 37.2 millimeter diameter case, and here we have a 36 millimeter diameter case. Both of them do have 18 millimeter lugs, which is slightly on the smaller size, the smaller side of sizing for myself, but I do think it is kind of borderline. It's weird how I'm so completely okay with 19 millimeter lugs, but 20 and 20 of course, but 18 and below, they just don't sit well with me. I don't know if that's a mental blocker or not, but let me know down in the comments what you think when we get to the on-wrist portions. But in terms of their dimensions, guys, if I was to compare these right now, you have 37.2 versus 36 millimeters here. In terms of thickness, you're gonna have 12.7 versus 12.5. And in terms of lug to lug, you have 44.5 versus 41 and 0.1. So really short on the lug to lug on this Presage. It is slightly smaller kind of in every dimension, but I will say they are very close in terms of their wearing profile. And of course, I think the style, this is going to be more on the dressy side as a dedicated dress watch. Also a bit more stripped down, considering that it has no date complication there. And that is cool. That's something that you don't find every day with a modern Seiko watch. But when it comes to its simplicity, it makes up for it in all these great ornate details, like the much more articulated bracelet, the fine details on that textured dial there. So it's not like they skimped out on anything. They just decided to shift their focus, versus here on the Seiko 5, ultimate versatility was clearly king, and they only wanted to take it to a certain threshold before you get to diminishing returns, right? This is definitely a more versatile kind of go anywhere, do anything type of setup, versus this being a lot more particular and feeling quite dressy and classy. I think both of them do dress up quite well, though. I mean, you imagine this on a, shiny black alligator strap. I think that'd be quite dressy. And the same goes here, although the bracelet on here is so well articulated with those very short links and everything that honestly it makes you think, why would you ever want to take this off of this bracelet? But I will say in dedicated dress environments, this one will definitely shine a bit more, versus this is going to be more of a versatility play, being able to kind of go back and forth between various situations. Now, this has a curved Hardlex crystal, which is great, very clear. Hardlex is their own proprietary mineral crystal. It's not a sapphire, but I will say that I have never scratched a Hardlex crystal. I've scratched every other type of mineral crystal I've ever used. I have never been able to scratch a Hardlex on any of the watches that I have, but I have very few Hardlex watches that I have in heavy rotation. So there's that, but it's great. It's very clear. It doesn't even ever need an AR coating because it just has ultimate clarity. Versus here, you do have a sapphire crystal, which is great. It's going to be much more scratch resistant. But with that, in terms of, hey, you have a dome, now it's good to have that inner anti-reflective coating, and you can see it's working really well. It doesn't cast any different hues or shades onto the dial or anything like that, so it's very nice in terms of its clarity. And man, look at the fine detailing on that dial. No, it's not quite Mount Iwate level of grand Seiko texturing, but it's meant to evoke the pattern of silk, and I think it does a great job of really capturing that texture versus just doing a simple sunray. They did something special, and I think it worked. Now, so another couple of quick ornate details. Look at the curved hand set there. That second hand, the minute hand there. Also, the dial itself is curved versus this being a little bit more straightforward. But look at, this is like a modder's dream. Look at that dial, the hand set. Absolutely gorgeous. And when I say modder's dream, I mean like you'd love to see this swapped into something else, right? Not to say that this isn't nice, but it's not quite optimal at least with the 18 millimeter lugs. For me, I would have preferred 20 millimeter lugs, but I also understand that, again, not every watch is made to be my perfect watch. Some of them are for everyone else, and this one is, I'm still getting enough enjoyment from it, that, again, I can't be mad because they tempted me enough to pull the trigger on one of these. So yeah, I think these are both great, but let's go ahead, get them on the wrist and compare how they wear. Okay, as you guys can see on my 7.5-inch wrist, or 19 centimeters circumference, I think it looks quite good, even a bit small. Look how well centered that is. Look how much bracelet there is at that top-down view. And I don't even have the widest, flattest wrist. It's not necessarily the most accommodating. It's actually quite tall and round. So I do have to pay attention to things like lug to lug, as well as ultimate dimensions and proportions, the way they all play together. The nice thing about a smaller watch is when you get your wrist close to the lens, you're not going to face as much perspective distortion. Well, I guess you'll still get it, but it's just less noticeable because the watch, when you make it look bigger, it doesn't make it look oversized. But of course, if I keep my wrist nice and low and then just tighten up the frame, sorry, let me just get that little piece of lint off, and then just tighten up the frame here, you're going to notice that we can still get a detailed look, but just add a bit of a truer aspect ratio as how this may lay on your own wrist. And I think this is very handsome. For me, not something I'd be super comfortable wearing with a short sleeve, but underneath the cuff, I think this will look great, and just a little bit more of a dressed up setting. Not necessarily anything away from casual, because it could be business casual or it can be full out casual, and maybe it's just underneath the sleeve of a flannel, but something about a smaller watch peeking out from underneath the sleeve for me just feels more at home, whereas a larger watch is going to look a little bit better on a short sleeve, which is what I find myself in most of the time. You can see the Seiko 5, really very nice here. You're getting a day-date complication. You're getting that 4 o'clock crown. You're getting the dual batons at 12. This is very much a classic Seiko watch. And honestly, it's a revival of a very classic Seiko watch. So this one really does, although it doesn't shout in a way that's overly loud, it does exclaim quite proudly that, hey, I am a funky little Seiko watch. And I think that's the allure to this one, that it is, you know, while being quite versatile and unoffensive, it also is quite funky and attractive. Whereas here, this one's going to be more subtle. Definitely. It's weird, right? Because it's full gold. Gold tone, I should say. There's just a subtlety, a more, I guess, relaxed nature here. I guess more carefree versus, again, this one, I feel like it just has a lot of personality, a lot of pizzazz, but this colorway itself does help make it sedate enough. Well, you know, again, plus the gold, which I think is very cool, for it to just be, you know, kind of infinitely versatile, which I like a lot. So with that said, let's get these off the wrist, set up for some Lume shots, low light transition, and closing thoughts. Okay, let's go ahead and hit the lights here. All right, as you can see, one of them has Lume and the other one does not. But one thing I always like to work in is going to be a bit of a low light transition, because you're not always going to be out in the middle of a field enjoying direct sunlight. A lot of times you're going to find yourself coming out of buildings, walking underneath overhangs, or just hanging out underneath the shade of a tree. So it's nice to see what these colors, textures, and finishes render like in less than optimal lighting. As you guys can see here, still quite legible even without Lume, even it being a bit more tone on tone with the champagne under gold. But I will say, you know, one very dynamic with that sunray pattern and one a lot more subtle with that smooth silk-like texturing. But I think they both pop in really fun ways. What do you think as you look at this transitional setup here? I think they're very handsome, especially when you consider the price difference. Of course, you're going to be able to get both of these at a bit of a discount than what you would normally find. These are not watches, Seiko, at any price point, unless they are limited or at least in high demand at the time of release. Typically, you're going to pay slightly less than MSRP because it's pretty open that people do discounts here and there, different dealers, whether they be authorized dealers, of course, even authorized dealers. But then, you know, gray market and everything like that, they're always going to have deals. But I think these both look really cool, are of course quite different, but I think do offer something that is a bit lacking in today's modern Seiko lineup. So I wanted to make sure to really highlight these, you know, as some that made it into my personal collection. Now, again, a couple of notable differences. The price point, there's $585 difference between these two models, between the Presage and the Seiko 5. Of course, that's full price, but definitely still something to consider. That's a whole nother watch for some people. In terms of features, of course, I got to note that the Presage does have a full day of extra power reserve, 3 days versus slightly under 2 days. Also, it has a sapphire crystal with an inner anti-reflective coating versus the 5's uncoated Hardlex mineral. Although mineral are generally less reflective and more resistant to shattering, while being, of course, more susceptible to scratches. Also, the Presage has a fully milled folding section on its butterfly style clasp, whereas the Seiko 5 Sports does have that stamped clasp. But that stamped clasp also has micro adjustment, not a ton, but it does have micro adjustment. But then, of course, it probably needs a little bit more because it's the link length on the bracelet is a little bit longer, whereas the Presage, kind of every link is essentially a half link, so it's going to be pretty easy to dial in. Also, in terms of the construction, one of them has pin and collar. That's going to be the Presage, and then the 5 is going to be just split friction pins. So yeah, there's definitely a few differences there, but then there's some commonality that I really like. So bottom line for me is either of these will definitely scratch the itch for a handsome everyday Seiko, especially when maybe you already have a dive watch or an alpinist or a field watch or anything. Like, once you've kind of covered the air, land, and sea of it all, sometimes it's nice to have, again, that versatile, slightly dressier piece, slightly smaller scale that's going to work better underneath a cuff. So, of course, out of these two, even though they cover a broad spectrum that I think there's a lot of overlap, one does lean more into the dressier realm, being the Presage, while the other leans more into the sportier side, being the Seiko 5 Sports. And between the two, though, you'll still get a classic gold tone retro aesthetic that pops on the wrist without being too loud or shouty. Which would you choose and why? Let me know down in the comments below. If you liked the video, please like, and if you're already, please subscribe for more content just like this. Thanks, guys.